Let's get some things started. So I want to bring up the first speaker. First session is Raising Capital in 2023, State and Evolution of Sources of Financing for Developers. So Patty's going to lead our fireside chat, Patty Toledo from 4Players. And then also, I hope I'm not butchering this, Olya Caliujnaia, CEO of Sanlo, as well as Kristian Segerstrale, CEO of super evil Megacorp. You please join on stage.
Thank you very much for being here. We're going to start with a very simple, please introduce yourself, although we already know your companies, but there is a lot of history behind it, so if you could tell a little bit about you.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah? All right. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to meet you all here. We're Sanlo. The way we started the company, both of us, the founders, worked in game development ourselves, in product and engineering, so have seen firsthand some of the challenges and opportunities of building games, and then eventually moved out of all things into fintech. And about 2 years ago, we saw the opportunity. We thought that there should be a company that builds financial products and services specifically for game and app developers. So we started Sanlo. So excited to be here.
My name is Kristian Segerstrale. I'm the CEO of super evil Megacorp. I've been building computer games companies for 21 years now, go way back. Pretty much with Chris doing his text messages right now, which is getting...
very disturbing.
No, please, sorry, I didn't, Your Highness, I didn't mean to disturb. So I've been building computer games companies for a long time. Super evil Megacorp, the company I run today, is focused on AAA, cross-platform games. We came from mobile first, AAA, and we believe that there's an opportunity to build incredible experiences for all players on all platforms, as opposed to just on console and then have a dumbed-down experience for mobile. But I'm also a relatively prolific, seed investor and a student, more than anything else, of the industry and where it's heading. And this is a super interesting year for lots of different reasons, and I really believe some amazing things will be built this year, and I'm very excited to be studying the market together with you guys.
And nobody cares who I am, but I'm Patty Toledo. I'm the marketing director for 4Players and the head of content from Still Media. So if you saw any speaker and you didn't like, you can complain to me later. That's my fault. And I am a big fan of what Sanlo is doing. And when I was talking to Olya, I convinced her that I know what I'm talking about. So she allowed me to be the moderator here. So big pleasure to be. So I wanted to start with an overview a little bit of last year and how we're going to do. So last year we saw that there is a prediction that it's going to be a decline on revenue for after the pandemic, that games might be a little bit in trouble. Chris talked about that in the intro as well. How do you see that happening when it comes to warmth for investment and how the market would react on that?
I can start. I think, very simplistically, I think people will always play games, however you put it. There has been growth in number of players that are playing. There's been a number of companies that have been popping up. The monetization has come down, and that I think is obviously linked with the general economic environment and how much, on average, people spend. But I think it will bounce back, but we are in a downturn for sure. That being said, again, coming back to the basics, people will play. People will keep building. I think, not to jump ahead, but I think the way capital is being allocated is going to change from within the companies themselves, and then from the investment perspective, it will also change in terms of who invests and what kind of metrics, teams are being looked at. I'm not going to go further than that, but again, I think we've gone through those cycles multiple times already. Eventually, it does come back. So I think it's tough times ahead potentially, but it's a reset a little bit as well, and I think it's potentially higher pressure on the product and the quality of the product itself.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I agree with that. I think there's been an unusually fast amount of growth in the industry over the last several years, and as a result, I think we've gotten used to as an industry this idea that we have to be growing by double digits every year, and that just there's going to be a new platform and a new technology which will again power another very fast sort of growth cycle. And I think right now, I mean, it's a cliche, but I mean, investors at the end of the day, they're sort of right at the end of the whiplash effect in the industry, and they have the behavioral patterns of lemmings or sheep, depending on what you prefer, I suppose, where while there is a clear narrative and everybody thinks that this thing is going to be valuable, so hence all the companies will be able to raise money, so I better get in early, makes sense as a mindset. If you know that you're in a flock of lemmings, even if you happen to be a really, really clever lemming, the dominant strategy is still to follow the other lemmings because you know that that's where everybody's going to be. So hence, in particular as an investor, your number one goal is to make sure the company gets more capital when it needs it. So if you know that you're in a quote-unquote hot company or in a hot sector, yes, they will be able to get more capital when they need it, even if they make a mistake down the line. So as a result, it makes sense to follow. Now that we're in a state where the narrative is much less clear in the industry. I was at an event 6 months ago, a sort of seed stage game VC event, where the prevailing conversation was like, is gaming over? Like, can you invest profitably at an early stage game company right now, given how expensive it is to distribute, given how organics are down, given how production costs are up, all of these things that everybody in this room sort of knows to, up to here. And the prevailing wisdom right now is, you know what, maybe not. So as a result, you have like an 80% decline in VC, in early stage game VC investment, which I think was published by, I want to say, Convoy Ventures maybe a couple of days back. Put out that number. I don't know if it's exactly right, so don't quote me on it, but you do have this massive apprehension of, hey, can I invest at an early stage because the worry is 1 year from now when the company needs more money, who will be there to invest in them? Because if everybody's worried about this space. That said, as Olya so eloquently said, people will play games. In fact, in downturns, one of the things I'm excited about is that there is a lot of talent available right now building some new stuff. We haven't innovated as a game industry for a little while. When's the last time you played a game that was truly different than some of the other games that you've played for a long time? And I think there's an opportunity to do that right now. So capital is important. I would just say that what happens in these down cycles in the industry, and I've been through a couple, is that you just need to be more creative. This is sometimes hand-to-hand combat. You need to think about, are there other sources? Maybe VCs aren't the natural funders of a creative industry in every case always, right? Maybe the right thing is to actually team up with folks that do have money to deploy, whether they be publishers, for example, other forms of strategic partners that also need access to players and want to deploy capital, or even forms like more innovative forms of debt funding, like what Sanlo is building, for example. It's a really interesting, different form of funding for the market. So it's, in some ways, when we are forced to rethink the market and rethink our situation, there's a lot of opportunity for creativity on product, on company building, and on how we finance things.
But just to add to this, I think generally as an industry, oftentimes we think about venture capital as a common source. To put it in perspective, there are relatively few VC-backed companies in the world, period. So thinking about the publishing, I think obviously as one of the common sources of financing for the gaming industry specifically, I think we're a little bit of self-promotion, I suppose, but where we're coming from and some other companies that are doing similar things is that there's enough data from a third-party publishing, as well as the market research, as well as the proprietary company data, where the decision-making around financing becomes much easier and much more objective. And I think this is where the opportunities really are for the gaming companies themselves. Why, again, from a VC perspective, why dilute yourself? From the publishing perspective, why give up that independence and ownership of the product? So I think that's the exciting part, and I think in terms of, to Kristian's point, the amount of capital has not shrunk. There's, however cliche it may sound, there's a lot of money in the world. There has been a lot of capital has been accumulated. Now it's how that capital is going to be deployed and who it's going to go to. And I think there's companies that have the data, that have not only the team, and team is obviously important, but have some level of traction and the metrics going back to the product quality. It's going to be, I don't want to say easy, but it's going to be easier to obtain capital, and it does not necessarily have to come from the sources that we have known for years as the industry.
What I love is that you already answered our second question, which is great. Like, that's what happens when you talk too much about something. The conversation goes directly. So I wanted to jump to the third one, which is a lot, when we're talking about investment and the companies are applying for investment, a lot of the discussion is always teams first. The most important thing is what the team that you have, the backtrace that they have, where they worked, which company they were in. And for a lot of companies, that's not always the easiest thing to do, because not all the time you had the luck of working in Supercell or Rovio or being part of these big companies. So what, in your case, what are the parameters and requirements that you look when you're seeing a company for investment? What does it make a company really attractive as an investment when you are talking in this situation?
Yeah, I think that's where Kristian and I can complement each other very well. I think it depends on the stage, and I would say so. Ourselves, putting ourselves in the shoes of, I think, some of the folks here, we started a company 2 years ago. We were a pre-seed stage company, no traction, just backgrounds. And who was being assessed? It was the founders. It was the two of us, and it's our ability to execute and the belief of our investors that we can do it. And I think it's the same thing with any industry, whether you're fintech or a gaming company. At the early stages, it's the team. And that's what matters. And I think it's more of a question maybe to somebody like Kristian, who's done investment as an institutional investor and as an angel investor. I think when it comes to the point of, again, there's some product in the gaming industry in particular, there's a soft launch at the very least. You already have the product, you already have the traction. So I think at this point it becomes, the product speaks for itself. In our experience as the company, in my personal experience, we have seen companies that may have fantastic teams on paper, but the execution is not exactly there and the metrics are not there. So, and then it just doesn't work. So I think the more mature the product and the more demonstrable the traction, the less team matters. And when I say about the product traction, we very much come from the free-to-play world, a little bit of subscriptions. In our case, we're looking at the health of the economy of the game. And, and it's kind of across the 4 buckets of metrics. It's, acquisition, retention, engagement, monetization. And I think the importance of each of those buckets varies depending on the stage of the company, depending on the environment we're operating in. But to answer your question, I think the more mature the product, I think the less important the team becomes. It's still very important, absolutely important. But as a capital provider, you're not betting the future of your investment on the team as much as in the early stages.
It's actually interesting. Would you say that when you guys consider your financings, do you actually even look at the team at that point in time, or is it like what percentage of the decision does it make?
It's a small percentage. It's a single-digit percentage in the total scoring. So if we were to say 100% of scoring is allocated looking across different metrics of the company, then the team is going to be in the single percentage.
And that's super interesting, because most VCs that I have experience talking throughout the year, it's usually the other way around. It's all about the teams. A lot of the companies they are financed even before they have a product, just by the team. So this aspect where the product's talking and data is talking gives, I think, a fairer chance for companies to get investment. Would you say so?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that what Sanlo is doing for sure is democratizing access to investment in that way, because it is true that the venture capital is also it's an incredibly relationship-driven business. I mean, it's a terrible example, but it's true. I mean, me and Olya used to work together at Playfish a long time ago. Olya was absolutely amazing, a total superstar at Playfish. So when she comes back, sometime later and says, hey, I'm starting my company, it's a really easy decision for me to say, hey, I want to back that company, because I know just share how smart and work ethic and everything else that goes into that. And I know that it's going to be it's going to be at least a good shot. But it's very, very difficult, truthfully, as a venture capital. I tried to be a full-time investor 10 years ago, and I got anxiety out of having to say no to too many people, because it's terrible. Like, you try to assess in 1 hour, somebody's pitching to you their live stream, I want to build this thing, and I really sympathize with people wanting to build things. I've been building things my whole life, and it's exciting. I don't want to be the person who shoots it down based on really superficial arguments, when really what you're trying to assess as an investor is, is this group of people, do they have the smarts and the talent to make the product, but also do they have the resilience for when things go wrong? Can they, back to that earlier point I made about raising more capital, can they go and convince someone else to give them 10 million or whatever it is 2 years down the line when they're going to need it? And it's, you sit there and you listen to like really passionate slides on things, and it's really tricky. If you haven't worked with a person before, if you don't have a pre-existing relationship, or you know somebody who knows somebody, it's really difficult to assess. And that's why like the Silicon Valley is correctly, I think, accused of being incredibly like relationship driven and to some degree like discriminatory. If you don't know somebody who knows somebody, it's very, very difficult to get into that world. Whereas, on the other hand, through providers like Sanlo, I think there's a much more democratized, much more open access to potential financing sources. So from that point of view, I think it's exactly right.
I want to address a little bit the elephant in the room, which is all these layoffs that is happening. Like, my question I put in 2022, but pretty much happened now. Like Google and other companies dismissing a lot of people. Do you guys believe that it's going to be like it happened with Nokia a few years ago, where all these talents are going to go out and build amazing companies doing great things? Or is it going to influence the gaming market and the investment market at all?
I mean, I guess I'm Finnish, so I feel like the narrative of Nokia collapsed and mobile gaming grew in Finland is probably not exactly right. Most of the folks there's some people did get into mobile gaming that way, but it's not the predominant route. Most people who were building those mobile gaming companies had already started building them before Nokia went down. But anyway, neither here nor there. I do think that downturns like this are an amazing opportunity to remix talent. It is like, and again, I say it with the greatest amount of humility to obviously the people experiencing hardship and going through difficult times. But the truth is that a lot of, I think, of us in the industry, arguably we've been stuck in a bit of a rut in that there's not a whole lot of innovation going on, or has not been a whole lot of innovation going on. People have just looked at what's worked before, let's make that and tweak it a little bit. And when everything is going up and to the right and companies are growing and paying great salaries and just growing left, right, and center, it's very difficult to argue against that narrative. You'd be crazy not to take that high-paying job offer at company X to go do more of the same. Whereas in this kind of situation where when your life gets turned upside down, when you no longer have a job, or you're forced to rethink what you're doing, I think there's an incredible cauldron of innovation and opportunity there to go and make something new and different. And frankly, what players deserve to play, as opposed to what the current sources of big bosses of the big companies are wanting to make. So I am hoping, of course it's a wishful thinking at this moment in time, let's see how it pans out, but I'm hoping that with a mix of interesting new sources of capital, a set of talent that are out there with this, of course, new sets of technologies like AI, perhaps even some of the innovations brought to us by Web3 and other things, perhaps there will be entirely new takes on games, new takes on communities, new takes on ways to entertain ourselves. And I think the industry needs that right now. We need that far more than we need the next first-person shooter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to this. I think to the point about the tools, personal opinion, super excited about the opportunities that generative AI, for example, presents, right? Like, I think the levels of productivity just unprecedented. And I think the times of freed up talent, that's one, but it has the potential to be compounded by extra tools that did not exist before. And it's truly amazing to see how much of immediate application that already has for asset creation of different types, whether it's sound, audio, or graphics. And like we've seen companies where it's changed the workflows significantly. It changed the composition of the teams. It changed how people work and what kind of quality of work that they produce. So I think in addition to having more talent, there's an opportunity to become more efficient, but not just efficient, but also being creative. And I think that creativity, that's such an important aspect of the industry, of the gaming industry, like no other. And that creativity can come in many different flavors. So I'm personally excited about every crisis, I think, oftentimes presents the opportunity. And those that wanted to create the companies, now is the time, however hard it may seem. But then in addition to that, there are unprecedented set of solutions that did not exist before. So I think it's a wonderful time to build, and it's exciting.
I think we exploded on, but I wanted to just have one thing. As we're starting the track what would be a message that you guys would like people to leave this fireside chat with?
Well, I will start. Firstly, anybody who says doom and gloom about games don't know what they're talking about, to be honest. People play games, more and more people play games. Is an incredible opportunity. But I would say this, that as company builders, I think now is a really good time to really think how you're going to be different, and also how you make it through the times that, say, venture capital investors are not out there aggressively investing. Sometimes that literally just comes down to, if you have like 10 units of work or capital or people or whatever it is, I would invest 9.5. Well, 9 out of those into purely making an incredible product. And then the last one, I would invest in finding partners who also want to build that with you, be they strategic partners or brand partners or other folks who want to somehow collaborate with you that aren't necessarily venture folks. And then the 11th person, because every game company does, 10 persons work with rather 11 persons work with 10 people, whatever. I would go talk to Olya to see if you guys can collaborate somehow, because she's providing a really interesting source of capital.
I think it's the product, and it's the product for the right people, and it's nothing new, but it's focusing on who this is for. And I think now in the times that UA, as we've known it, has changed, it's not going back to what it was before. I think it's even more important to understand who the game is going to be for, and then why they would even want to play it. And I think from there, the pieces will come out more naturally in terms of what's the genre, what's the narrative, where the distribution channels should be. I think the user focus becomes even more important because acquisition is more difficult. And I think so I would say product definitely is the focus, and who this product is for. And I think to build up on what Kristian said, I think it's a founding journey is a fun journey, but it's not always easy. And it's tough times, but it's a great time to do this. So just never giving up, especially in those times. And I think it's time to build, and it's the strongest, the most innovative will survive.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.